Welcome to this week's edition of Prep Zone Extra Points, sponsored by John Hoffer Jeep Chrysler. This week featuring Rick Peterson, Tim Bisel, and Brent Maycock.
Hey, high school sports fans. Welcome to another edition of Extra Points. I'm Tim Bisel, the executive sports editor here at the Topeka Capital-Journal and CJ Online. Once again joined by our two prep experts. A couple of bad hombres, I guess I should say.
See.
I will turn most of this show over to you guys because we had a lot to talk about today. We'll go over some of tonight's results and then we'll take a look ahead at next week's playoff pairings. But let's start with our games of the week. City game of the week this week. Junction City 20, Seaman 13. Pistol, you had that one. The Blue Jays overcame a 10-7 halftime deficit, scored 2 third-quarter touchdowns, and ran for 240 yards, including 149 by Ryan Hennington to finish the season 7-1 and 5-1 in the league.
Good game. In fact, and Seaman, I think, had their chances. I mean, they were ahead at halftime. They gave up a touchdown, and then they had a problem with a punt that hit the up man and set up another Junction City touchdown. But then Seaman had a couple opportunities and got down deep, first half and the second half. Turn field goals into touchdowns, and you're right there. Coach O'Neill, I think, was very proud of their effort and thought they played them well and said they're very close to being a good team. Now it's time to, cut out some of the big plays they're giving up and things like that, and they'll be fine. And I think they got a good chance to go 2-3 whatever rounds in the playoffs.
We'll get a little into their playoff matchup a little bit further down the road in the show, but it didn't look like this loss really hurt him in terms of that. Dalton Cowan gets 168 yards passing, and the Vikings finished 6-2 overall, and still the number 2 seed in 5A. Brent, the area game of the week, we saw Hayden kind of rally for a 47-32 win against Holton. At Holton, the Hayden Wildcats forced 3 third-quarter turnovers to kind of storm back from a 26-14 deficit and clinch a Class 4A Division II berth.
Yeah, that game really flipped after halftime. The first half, Holton really could do no wrong offensively, aside from some penalties. But every time they got the ball, they scored pretty much, scored on 4 straight possessions, kind of were taking control of the game after they fumbled the opening kickoff. Hayden turns that short field into a touchdown right off the bat, but then Holton comes back and going into halftime, they're in charge of this game, and they come out the second half. Hayden gets the ball first, they get a touchdown, and then it's fumble, touchdown, and just like that, it was blood in the water. And I talked to Coach Arnold and I talked to Brent Peebler after the game and said, what was the mindset at halftime?
What was that halftime message?
And Brent was like, well, I don't know that we were mad, and then Arnold says flat out, hey, we were embarrassed, by how our defense played, and upset definitely. And the defense played that way in the second half, and they just totally flipped the game on its head and took control. And after that third quarter, that game was done. Holton tried to come back in the fourth, but Hayden had just sucked the whole momentum out of that game and took control, and they played really well. When I talked to Coach Arnold after the game, he said, getting the turnovers is one thing, and doing something with them is the key part, and they were able to do that. After the first fumble, it's an immediate touchdown pass to Deshaun Hanukkah. After the second one, it's 2 or 3 plays, and they turn that into a touchdown. So they're not only turning them into points, but turning them into touchdowns in a big game.
Hayden also got a really big game tonight from Connor Hobart, 104 yards rushing and 3 touchdowns. Yeah, Thomas Stringers kind of led them for most of the year, but that's a really nice breakout game for Hobart.
And they win a game where they're outgained by about 150 yards in that game. So, that tells you what the defense was opportunistic and the offense was opportunistic as well.
Absolutely. In other city action tonight, Washburn Rural defeated Topeka West 48-14. Rural clinches a home playoff game in Class 6A. Kind of jumps out to a 48-7 lead at halftime and just rolls from there. Quarterbacks Jordan White and Preston Williams combined for 244 passing yards against West. Topeka High rolls Highland Park 56-6 behind another strong game from Kai Thomas. Kai rushes for 224 yards on 17 carries tonight as the Trojans wrap up a 5-3 regular season. And finally, Shawnee Heights whipped Emporia 41-12 tonight. Another big rushing performance for Heights, 369 rushing yards tonight behind the trio of Trey Brown, Trey Jenkins, and Christian Clark. All those guys had nice performances. The T-Birds also got a couple of interceptions from Mitchell Lady in winning for the third time this season. Any of those games jump out at you, or what jumps out at you?
Shawnee Heights, that was a game that I saw as a toss-up going in, and Shawnee Heights really needed that to improve their playoff position, and we'll talk about it in a little bit, but they put themselves in a good playoff position.
Very good. How about you?
Yeah, I thought it was a game that I thought Shawnee Heights would win, but I thought it would be a really close game, a game Emporia could win if they came out and played like they did, some against Seaman, against Hayden, some of those teams that I thought were pretty even with Shawnee Heights for much of this year. So for Shawnee Heights to go out and really dominate that game is a good sign for them going into the playoffs and a playoff bracket that really sets up pretty nicely for the T-Birds.
We'll transition right there into the playoffs next week. Let's start with our 6A teams. Both of our 6A teams finished 5-3. They're going different places, though. Washburn Rural has a home game to start, and Topeka High has to go on the road. The Junior Blues will be the 7th seed in the Class 6A bracket and play 10th seed Dodge City. Topeka High will be on the road at Wichita Northwest in a matchup of a pair of 5-3 teams.
Several things there. First of all, the fact that how tough that bracket is in the West shows you when the number 10 seed is 5-3.
Absolutely.
You know, and Topeka High is a very good 5-3 at number 9. But Rural should be tough at home. They're playing well. They probably let a game or two get away this year, or they would be even better. But they're in a good spot. Dodge City's going to be really tough. I think it's going to be a tough game for them. But I think it's a game that Washburn Rural has to feel pretty good about. Topeka High got a brutal draw.
It's as bad a draw as they could possibly ask for in this playoff format. They opened with the Wichita Northwest team. Sorry to step in here, but they opened with the Wichita Northwest team that is very explosive offensively, have a dynamite passing game, have a really, really good running back, and can beat you both ways. Now, I don't know how much defense will be played in this game. Northwest does give up a lot of points, but they're a team that can go out and match Topeka High's athleticism and scoring power. Should be a very entertaining game from that standpoint, but just not a good draw for the Trojans. And then if they win that game, hey, you get Derby, the defending state champion, who has just been completely dominant this season.
But I do think High has the firepower. High has the firepower to win a shootout. If it gets to a shootout with Kai Thomas, Corey Thomas, and some of those guys, they can win that shootout. I just think that they got to forget about the seedings, forget about the matchups, and just get ready to play. Walt Alexander, the Trojans coach, said they are playing their best football of the season. They're healthier than they've been all season. So I think we're not saying at all that they can't beat them. I think they can beat them. It's just when you look at the other matchups that the city teams got, this is the toughest.
Yeah.
It almost sounds like it's the Trojans' powerful running game against Northwest passing attack. Is that fair?
Well, Northwest has a very good running back who's well over 1,000 yards this year, Jalil Rounds. He's a very, very good back. So they kind of complement their offensive attack. So they can throw the ball, but they can run the ball as well. So they had Garden City dead to their rights earlier this year. Garden City finishes the regular season undefeated. They were up 3 touchdowns and maybe even more. It might have been 27-0 and end up losing that game. So that shows you that they can be hurt by another team's offense that's really good. So yes, I agree with Pistol that if it gets to a shootout, Topeka High is going to have a chance in this game because Wichita Northwest doesn't really stop good offenses, but their offense is good enough to outscore good offenses
and they
as well.
haven't seen Kai Thomas.
Well, if you're a fan of offenses and a fan of shootouts, this is the game to go watch. It sounds like ought to be exciting. On the in the 5A bracket, Seaman is the number 2 seed at 6-2, and will start at home against Casey Harmon. Harmon is 0-7. Seaman's the only city school on the 5A side with a home game. Shawnee Heights, the number 9 seed at 3-5 on the road at St. James, 4-4, and then Topeka West will visit Great Bend, the number 2 seed, and Highland Park will visit Casey Slagle, the number 1 seed. What strikes you about those games?
Well, first of all, let's go Seaman. Seaman was 2-8 last year. and turns around and they're the number 2 seed. And yes, the 5A East is that bracket's not a great bracket. It's not top heavy bracket anyway. But for Seaman to completely turn it around like they have and go from 2-8 to 6-2, and their bracket, at least the early part of their bracket, shapes up great. All they got to do is take care of business against Harmon, and they'll win that decisively. They should beat the winner of Turner and Washington in the second round. And then you're staring at a possible game against Aquinas in that third round. But, I'm sure at this point, Coach O'Neill's not thinking any farther than the first game and trying to build some momentum like they've had most of the year. But for Seaman to, and the other thing about this is new coach, new system. They're senior heavy, but they got also some younger players they're trying to work in. Any extra practice time, game time you get is good for a program trying to move forward. And if they can all of a sudden be up around 10, 11, games, that's going to help them a lot.
Absolutely. We've talked about the job Glenn O'Neill's done a lot on these shows, and pretty amazing turnaround. How about Shawnee Heights' draw? They're right there in the middle, 9 versus 8.
I love their draw. I think they have the best possible draw they could have hoped for. They go on the road for the first round to play St. James, but St. James is 4-4 and doesn't really have a marquee win to go with their resume there. They have a quarterback, Sammy Wheeler, who is committed to Kansas State. So I don't know if that's an indicting thing or a complimentary thing for him, the way quarterback play has been for the Wildcats this year.
But if he could suit up tomorrow, the Wildcats might be able to use him.
But I think that's a game that they can go on the road, and they have more playoff experience than St. James does over the past 5, 6, 7 years. St. James, a relatively new team to success in football. So I think that's a great chance for them to go win. And if they win that game, they're going to play the winner of Casey Schlegel and Highland Park, which I think will be Schlegel.
Going down on a limb.
Well, a lot of times you look at Highland Park against a KCK school, and they've fared well. I think Schlegel's a little bit different this year because they have a running back, Cornelius Ruff, all-name team, who is well over 1,500 yards, closing in on 2,000 yards this year. So I think that's like a difference maker for them in that game. But if they play Shawnee Heights, I give the edge to Shawnee Heights in that game because Schlegel's only loss is to Atchison, and Atchison is they're struggling a little bit right now. But that they're a good 4A team, but they're not a Centennial League 4A team. And so I think Shawnee Heights, if they get by St. James, they're going to make it out to the quarterfinals. And then you're looking at like Pittsburgh or Mill Valley. Mill Valley, the defending champions, but have struggled a little bit here of late. Pittsburgh, their only losses are to out-of-state schools. So we're not sure exactly what they have, but Shawnee Heights has played Pittsburgh at least twice in recent period in the playoffs and gotten them once.
Yeah, the Barstow game a couple years ago
when they had All-Stater Alex Barnes at Pittsburgh. So I really like Shawnee Heights' draw, and I wouldn't be surprised to see them in the state semifinals.
What Shawnee Heights is doing too is they've just went right back to the basics. They're just running the pig and making you stop them. And if they can continue to do that and take time off the clock and have long scoring marches and keep Sammy Wheeler and the offense off the field, I think they got a great chance.
Topeka West there at the 15 seed, but it almost looks like they may have gotten a worse draw than Highland Park in the number 16 spot. Is that fair?
Absolutely, Great Bend is head and shoulders better than Casey Schlegel is this year. They lose tonight for the first time all year in overtime. Controversial ending. They 4th and 1 in overtime. Quarterback reaches the ball over and it's knocked out of his hands as it crosses the plane or whatever. They rule it's a fumble, so they lose the game in overtime that way. But Great Bend, very, very good team, and that's a very, very tough draw for Topeka West.
It's probably too early to get you guys on the record for your postseason predictions, but let's close with just some thoughts about what you're really looking forward to seeing next week.
Well, I think there's some good matchups. I want to see how some of these games play out. I think there's some very good matchups and some very good halves of the state as part of, like we talked about, the 6A West. I'm curious to see just how this matches up. If there's some real ugly games, if there's some real ugly travel, not only this time, but, in the next couple of weeks, because everybody's looking to see how this new system is going to play out. I like it. It gave Brent and I something to talk about, most of the year, just who was doing what and how it was changing from week to week. And I like it, but we'll know a lot more over the next 2 or 3 weeks, just how, if this is a good system, if it needs any tweaks and things like that. But I think there's 2 or 3 city teams that are really good bets to move on. And, if that's the case, that would be better than the bigger schools in Topeka have done in recent years.
I like how it has made every game in the regular season very important. You look at the Topeka High-Washburn Rural matchup, that regular season game plays out huge into where these teams fall into the bracket this time. If Topeka High wins that game, they're looking at a home game. They're looking at a totally different playoff scenario than what they have right now. So I love how much more emphasis it puts on winning every game in the regular season, which is those games all should count rather than just, well, where are you at in districts and what are you going to do the last 3 games?
I agree. I've thought that all along. Well, it doesn't seem to me like the postseason should be here yet. It seems like the season has gone really quickly to this point, and I guess for the smaller schools, we still got another week to go. But for the larger classes, postseason begins next week. We're looking forward to it. Thanks again for joining us. Log on to cjonline.com and prepzone.com for all your prep sports. Thanks.